Did you think it was difficult as a woman to come into public service at that time?
That's kind of like a yes and no answer. So I think that it's easier now than it has ever been in the history of law enforcement and the first responder world in general for women to be hired. At this point, agencies are actively recruiting women, which I think is amazing. However, I think in general, it is very difficult for women to enter male-dominated spaces. And that's not unique to law enforcement. This happens in boardrooms and any other place where you find yourself being the only female in the room. And let me be clear, my agency is awesome. At no point in my career thus far have I felt like I've been treated differently or discriminated against because I'm female. So these are like more general feeling. Yeah. But, I think for women in male-dominated spaces, where it's more difficult is that there's an added layer of stress. It takes more resilience. It takes a little more mental fortitude. You have to work harder to both fit in and stand out at the same time. And you also have the added stress that you aren't just representing yourself, you're representing an entire group of people, right? You're representing all women in law enforcement or all women in a boardroom. And when your successes and failures aren't just your own, but they also represent a bigger group, it adds an urgency, it adds that level of like failure's not an option.
Help me understand a little more detail of how you have to stand out more to be your own person, but to also show that you want to be a really good employee without them saying she's a really good female cop.
Right.
She's a cop.
Right. These are more, I think, internalized problems for a lot of women, and not all women either. Like, good for you if you can walk into a room and just take up space, right? I think for a lot of us, that's a little more difficult to do. It takes a lot more push and self-motivation to get out there and speak your voice, to feel confident in your opinion that you're expressing in a room. Just feel like you're doing the job just as good as everybody else. Because sometimes the metrics in which we define what is good police work and what is not good police work is different for every briefing room, every shift, every group of people you're working with. To go back to what my challenges were coming into it, like I knew I was never going to be like a run and gun kind of cop, right? Utmost respect for the guys that want to chase the bad guys down, get the guns, get the drugs, like do the movie style stuff. I was a 33-year-old female. I knew that was not going to be my sweet spot. But if that's the only measure you have in a space for whether or not you're doing your job well, then it can become a problem, right? Mm-hmm. Then you're trying to find success on something that might not be one of your strengths. Women coming into it, some women are going to be able to run and gun, and that's awesome. We're capable of doing that. If that's not your thing, find your thing. Police work really is a spectrum, and there's so many options for where you can define yourself as a good cop. And I think that's a little harder for women to do, to find that space, find that niche, and to get the recognition and the respect, I think.